All right, good evening. I'm going to call the Policy and Services Committee meeting, a regular meeting here in Palo Alto of Tuesday, December 10th, 2024 to order. Madam Clerk, will you take roll, please?
Councilmember Koo?
Here.
Councilmember Tanaka? Councilmember Lithcott-Hames?
Here.
For the record, 2 present.
Awesome. Our next item is public comment for any item that is not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have any?
We do. Our first speaker is Lisa M. Looks like she's left chambers.
Okay, thank you. We'll close public comments on items not on the agenda and move straight into our action item. The first one is 2025 City Council Priority Setting Process, Discussion and Recommendations. City Manager.
Thank you, Chair, committee member. We will have our Assistant City Manager, Lupita Alamos, reporting for staff.
Well, good evening, Chair Koo, Councilmember Lithcott-Hames, Lupita Alamos, Assistant to the City Manager, and I'm happy to discuss or present our 2025 priority setting process discussion with Policy and Services that will inform our 2025 priorities. Next slide, thank you. As a process overview, we've been following this process since 2012. The priorities are reviewed annually and set by the council at its retreat this year. That is scheduled for January 25th, excuse me. Established council priorities assist the council and the staff to better allot and utilize time for discussion and decision making. And then your council defines this council priority setting process and defines a priority as a topic that will receive particular, unusual, and significant attention during the year. The handbook also talks about having no more than 3 to 4 priorities a year with a 3-year time limit. And in terms of engagement, the handbook talks about surveying the community on council priorities as well as the council in terms of recommendations for 2025. The Policy and Services Committee tonight will make these recommendations on process to the council, which will be reflected on the January 13th agenda. Also informed by this process, next slide, is the council values. These were adopted a couple of years ago, and it informs how these will help the council guide decision making. And these include a balance of revenues and expenses now and into the future. We're environmentally sustainable. Integrate equity into decisions, considering how decisions affect people differently, decisions that are based on their identity or circumstances, make decisions that create healthy and safe and welcoming community for all, safeguarding public trust through transparent practices, and embrace innovation. And I should also just reflect back that our 2024 council priorities this year are climate change and natural environment, protection and adaptation, community health, safety, wellness and belonging, economic development and transition, and housing for social and economic balance. So as mentioned in the previous slide, part of that engagement includes surveying the council on priority recommendations. This year, we received recommendations which were included in your attachment A, as well as in a supplemental report. Here are just the highlights. The attachment A includes verbatim the information we received from council members. And I won't read those individually, but they're listed here in high-level summary. Okay, next slide. We also received an email from Councilmember-elect George Liu and supplemental also feedback from Councilmember Burt. And I would like to just note that we did not receive comments from Councilmember Tanaka or Mayor Stone. So in terms of our staff recommendation tonight, so as noted in the staff report, annually the Policy and Services Committee is tasked with making edits to the handbook. However, earlier in this year, a significant amount of work went into updating that handbook. Therefore, staff is recommending that council forego substantive review of the City Council procedures and protocols handbook, given, as I mentioned, that a significant amount of work went into that earlier this year. As it relates to the retreat, staff is making the recommendation that the following elements be covered. First, as last year, we're recommending that council have a visioning for 2025, and this was delivered via three key questions that the council discussed around, first of all, what the priority should be, what the community engagements around that should look like to support and advance these goals, as well as looking at the resources, staff capacity, finances, partners that will help advance each priority, as well as B, discussion and approval of the priorities, and then key and community engagement needed to advance these council priorities, including ad hoc committees. And the staff report discusses and talks ad hocs and how we're using them now and how we can better utilize them in 2025 to be in alignment with the council's priorities and reflect staff capacity and resource needs. And then finally, to enable the recommendations above, we also included a recommendation for the 2025 mayor not to make council member appointments beyond the standing committees prior to the annual retreat. And with that, I'll turn it over to the chair.
Thank you for going through this. Madam Clerk, is there any public comments?
We have no request to speak.
Thank you. We'll close public comments and bring it back to the committee. Please, council members, Lidcott Haynes. Council member Tanaka? Nothing right now. Okay, council member Lidcott Haynes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Ms. Alamos, for the presentation. I'm really struggling with the fact that we have made so many edits to the handbook in 2024, really a carryover from council of 2022, which was not able to pull it over the finish line that December, as I recall, sitting here as a just elected, but not yet responsible for anything. They kicked it to this council and we finally got it done in 2024. Yet as I review the language specifically pertaining to what we're talking about tonight, which is the council priority setting retreat, I think the language in the handbook does not at all match the reality of what we're doing. I, as a new council member in January 2023, was bewildered because the description of what the priorities did not seem to align with what they actually are. Specifically, what I mean, for example, is it says in the handbook, as is repeated in the staff report, that these are priorities are to be particular, unusual, and warrant significant attention. These priorities are not unusual. Housing, economic development, health, safety, wellness, belonging, climate. These are not unusual. These are the overarching grand focuses of the city. So there's that language, unusual. It makes me think, why is that in there? These are not unusual. We're not just, it's almost like it contemplates, well, council can add a few unusual things to the regular work of the city. No, I think our priorities are supposed to set policy guidance for the regular work of the city. So that's one example, that word unusual. The second is, it says that priorities should be limited to 3 years. Housing, climate, economic development, health, safety, wellness, belonging, that's gonna be limited. What are we gonna have 3 years from now? You know, how is anything we come up with 3 years from now gonna be better than those 4 things? Maybe. I mean, things will morph over time. But I just think that's another example of the fact that whatever was contemplated by council when this segment was written, which I believe was 2012, doesn't match the reality. And so at a minimum tonight, I'd love to know if my colleagues have appetite for revising that language simply to fit with the actual practice. I would, for example, delete the notion that priorities are encouraged to expire after 3 years. And I would get rid of the word unusual as a description of a council priority. I have a few other thoughts, but I just wanted to sort of throw that out and see what my colleagues think about the fact that the way the handbook describes council priorities, what they are and what their limits are, really doesn't align with our present reality.
Sure. Yeah, so I'll give you my opinion of this, which is that I actually, in the 8 times or 8 years I've been at this thing, I gotta tell you, I think that the priorities that we said have zero impact on the city. I've never seen any impact or any evidence of impact. And I was wondering why, you know, especially in my latter years, I'm wondering why are we even doing this? Because I don't really see it affecting how staff does work, or we really don't really measure it actually. I actually just had to set goals for my team today, and you know, I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard the term like SMART goals, right? So like specific, measurable, all this kind of good stuff. And you know, definitely it's not this. This is like good feeling stuff, like climate change, great. You know, community health, great, right? But it's like I just don't think the way it's written or how we're set up has any effect at all on the city. So to be honest, I think it's a big waste of time. And so either we change it or we make it more effective. But I think the way it is right now is not good. And our handbook, by the way, I also feel like it's kind of like incredibly bureaucratic, and it should be like, you know, half the size or maybe a quarter the size or something. So that's my thoughts on that. But yeah, in terms of priorities, I think it should be something that is, and I do think we should actually have it. I just feel like the current process is pointless, and it doesn't have any real effect, and doesn't really change what staff does, or you know, how the council does its work either. So I think it needs a major revamp from where it is right now. And maybe, you know, other council members feel it's different and feel like it's, you know, incredibly impactful, but I've not seen it. So that's one of the reasons why I don't put too much time onto it, just because I don't think it's worth it. But hopefully we could change it and make it better.
Thank you, Councilmember Tanaka. I think I agree to some extent that we're not seeing the through line from the council priorities, these sort of lofty terms or broad categories. You're not seeing the through line to kind of what staff is actually doing. I actually do see the through line when we look at the 4 priorities. If you remember that, what do they call it? The placemat?
Yes.
It's the staff work plan for the year. It's color coded. Each priority gets a different color, and under each priority is listed 7, 11, 20 objectives
Or more.
that are very specific expectations of projects that will be undertaken, processes that will be undertaken, with a timeline or an expectation for when it'll be completed, and so on. So I have actually found in that document a very nice through line from a set of broadly defined priorities all the way down to, you know, are we getting the stuff done we're trying to get done? Is it actionable? Now, I'm not a business person like you are, Councilmember Tanaka, so I appreciate that you bring a finer lens to this than I do. I want to acknowledge that. But once I realized that the priorities are the framework, the objectives come underneath it, staff is putting objectives in, council's allowed to add a few objectives, but we have to be mindful of existing staff workload, right? All of that gets sort of hashed out at that retreat. I think it's actually, pretty well organized. It just feels that the handbook, and the reason I'm concerned about the handbook is our new members are going to read the handbook. And I think they're going to be just as confused as I was. And I think it's fair to say a couple other my colleagues were at that retreat 2 years ago, when the way it's all described in the handbook doesn't seem to match what is actually happening. And then it gets very confusing. Where's this work plan coming from? How does it relate to the priorities and objectives? It is all related. And I think the handbook should reflect that.
If I might comment as well. Chair, thank you. Yes, if I could just to perhaps dovetail with the comments that were made. I think it might be helpful also to think about this in terms of what has changed over the last few years. And it's actually, I think, only been the last 2 years that we've had this 70 plus objectives that again fall under the council's priorities. Prior to that, there actually, I think, might agree more with Councilmember Tanaka that as 4 statements, there wasn't a clear connection to the work staff was doing, and to add to Councilmember Lithcott-Hames what you described. As it happens, Lupita Alamos is responsible on a quarterly basis for developing the reports that we submit to you on our progress, and that you evaluate my performance on now. And so, it's really that to-do list that reflects the, again, the top level goals that are set or priorities that are set by the council. We fill in the objectives. You tell us if those are the right ones or change them. We retract them. And quite frankly, they are developed specifically as SMART goals to reflect what can be accomplished during that calendar year, reflecting the resources and expectations of what could be accomplished. So I just want to provide that perspective. And while I would note that while part of our recommendation is to not make any substantive or do a substantive review on the handbook, if there were some wording changes to clarify and perhaps eliminate some of that confusion, such as the 3-year time limit, then the committee could certainly make that recommendation, perhaps not with editing language, but just general direction to the full council, and staff, as we have in the past, can make the edits to the handbook based on that direction.
I appreciate that so much. And you've just suggested, City Manager, that we not give editing language. I think in addition to the 3 years and the word unusual, which I think doesn't at all reflect what priorities actually are, there is, I think, an absence of information in the current handbook about the fact that the objectives that come under priorities form the staff work plan. Is it the case? I am correct in saying that the objectives form the work plan, right?
It does. I will, I think it's only fair to acknowledge that in the first year we did this, we took stuff that was already in the works and said, okay, how do these relate to the goals and do they fit? I think in each successive year, we are able to better anticipate and then tailor the objectives to fit what we're hearing from the council. Just to give you a hypothetical, and this is a bad scenario, but I'll just describe it. If some major event were to happen and suddenly the council says public safety is our primary focus, then we'd have to, focus our attention there and tell you what else we might not be able to do in order to focus on public safety, just as a hypothetical there. So that first step of identifying the top line goals, priorities are important for us to be able to do the follow-up, irrespective of whether it's a tweak or if it's a major change.
Okay, then what I think I would like to do is make a motion to amend section 7B of the handbook that is entitled Annual Council Priorities, Background and Definition. I'd love if it's, I think I've created something that is a more accurate representation of what actually happens. If it turns out that this leads to disunity among us, staff have concerns, I want to throw something up that I think is helpful. If it turns out not to be, I'll replace that with a simpler motion, which will be strike the 3 years, strike the word unusual. Okay, so that's my plan is that all right, Madam Chair?
Right, you can put it up and basically this is going to be a recommendation to council at the priority session for the amendment of the handbook and specific to whatever it is that you're mentioning.
It would actually be a recommendation that will come to council, as I understand it, on January 13th. Is that right, Ms. Alamos?
Either the 13th or was it the 21st are the two meetings that will occur before the retreat. So I think if the committee has substantive recommendations, then we'd want to get that on as quickly as we can in advance of the retreat itself.
And that could possibly eliminate having to review the handbook at
Hope so.
the priority setting.
Yes.
Can we get the language?
Yes, ma'am. Let me just send it to the clerk.
While Madam Clerk is putting the language up, I have a few comments I wanted to make. Is it possible to have the placemat provided with a packet when it goes out? Then at least council members can have the opportunity to look at it, but also in a 11 by 18 sheet versus the condensed tiny letters.
Yes, I think we can certainly arrange for that and
Okay, I
to be
think because
distributed in
that is
advance.
actually very helpful. And from there, I think objectives to the different priorities can be also discussed. And we can see where the timeline of at what stage each of these things are at. Well, not we, they.
For the purpose of the council's one-day retreat, I think what we found over the last couple of years is it's really difficult to do both the priorities and a substantive review of the objectives on the same day. But I think we can start that second, that second phase of discussion on the day, and then staff will need to come back for more detail.
Okay, and then just to say, Councilmember Vinker had made the suggestion of climate sustainability action, using that word action and adaptation. I kind of like that because it's not about climate change, it's about climate action. So I would highly suggest that word, although, so I would just put that as a comment. You took care of my comment about the handbook. Then the other thing is the retreat starts at 9.
I don't think we've set a specific time, but it's generally been about 9 o'clock.
You're still trying to firm it up with the consultant, right?
Well, it really may be up to the council just to confirm.
Okay. I wanted to also add that, you know, the ad hoc committees, there's 7 of them, and so there's going to be a review at what state they're in and whether they should continue or not, because it has been going on for a long time. So I would actually really, because of the workload and the number of them, I'm really thinking that perhaps what you're suggesting and recommending for the structure to be recommended, so that council can take that into consideration and even funnel some of these ad hoc committees to the standing committee, so that it can be, it won't take up so much time. And, you know, to be honest, in certain instances with the ad hoc, I do have concerns about the discussion on its own without the public. And I think funneling it back into standing committees will, you know, bring for transparency and trust's sake, right? The other matter that I was kind of reading in here is about asking the mayor, 2025 mayor, not beyond the council member appointments to standing committees, not to have appointments. But are you saying standing committees as the city council, city standing committees, because there's the regional part that they're all waiting for us, because a lot of the other cities are doing it right now with their reorg. But for us, I just want to make sure that's okay,
You know,
or is that not recommended?
That's a good point. We did not intend to affect the timeline for those. So as a, perhaps a committee recommendation to ensure that that's clear, that those regional appointments can proceed or should proceed.
So maybe just the wording for item C be changed to say standing.
Or actually, perhaps it should be to focus on the ad hocs, not make appointments to, well, I think we chose committees other than the standing committees, right? So perhaps it's specific to the city's committees. What is the language we have?
If you can come up with a word, that
Okay.
would be great, just to make it clear, because
Right.
I certainly don't want the regional committees to be, and you know, there are positions that we've been working toward, you know, perhaps a chair position or something
Right.
that we don't want to delay or miss out on because we don't have an appointee. Okay, I think we can look at Councilmember Lithcott Hames.
Yes, rather
Thank
than
you, Madam
do
Chair.
all
I didn't send over a red line version. I apologize to the clerk for that, but you're doing a great job of figuring it out. So that final line of paragraph 1 on January 13 is an add. Then you've struck, there's a goal of no more than 3 or
Two
4.
ad hoc committees.
Council can identify 2 to 3. Yep. Yep.
Oh, she has a lot.
There's enough that's changed about the second and third paragraph. I think you've done a good job there putting that in red, all of it. And then, and the final paragraph, the only change is at the very end about reflecting the work of the city. It currently ends, the value, council to maintain these enduring intentions while also selecting annual priorities. So after the word that, reflect short, that direct the work of the city is the new language, so that you can put in black all the way up to the word that, yeah.
And, sorry, consistent with our actions on the handbook at other conversations, we will go through the text and make sure that it overall aligns. So I think the goal this evening, if this is the proposed text, is to just make sure it captures the nature of the change you would like to make.
Perfect. So colleagues, I tried to pull something together that I think aligns practice with the language of the handbook. If it seems too complicated or too much, like I said, we can just retreat. I'd be happy to withdraw the amendment, the motion, and just simplify it and say, let's remove 3 years and the word unusual. But if you wouldn't mind taking a look at this and seeing if it meets with your approval first, that would be great.
Will the current language be included to show the differences?
I presume so, yes.
I'm hoping
Yes.
that it will, because then it will give council previous and now recommendations.
Yes, anytime we're displaying changes to your handbook, we always do it in red line so that the council can see the current language and what's changing.
Yeah, the
So this is,
comparisons.
yes, this is intended to be red line, but if it's not 100%, we'll make sure that we do that on what's brought forward to the full council.
This
Mr.
is about
Shikata, did you have a
85%
question?
red line right now. That entire paragraph that's in red is not entirely new, but it is largely new, so.
If I could comment, there is in that new red paragraph, I can see the intent here to be comprehensive. What's I think potentially confusing about that is, quite frankly, that the staff work plan, as it's referred to, there is a reference here to staff work plan for the year, is a lot more than what you see on the placemat. And in fact, is a lot more than the city council sees at all. And so wouldn't want to give the impression that, again, everything staff does is encompassed within those objectives. So there may be some tweaking to that wording that might accomplish what we're trying to convey, which is, again, what staff is doing in advancing those priorities. That's what the placemat represents. So I think we might be able to come up with some alternative language, perhaps after this meeting, if the recommendation of the committee is to move forward. I would suggest that we take a shot at that, again, to avoid the impression that it's everything that staff does. The other thought is that I see in the following sentence that you're trying to maintain the ability to address emerging concerns, which makes sense for the council. I would say that even in the language as it currently exists in the handbook, that the priorities were not intended to be exclusive of other things that the council will tackle over the year. I think it has been an intent to simply kind of put a stake in the ground that these are 3, 4 topic areas that the council would pay specific attention to over the year. So I'm not sure that you need that part, but again, that's certainly committee's discretion as to whether it include.
This is very helpful. I appreciate it. And this was my opportunity to raise this. It's on the agenda now. And I'm simply trying to, make the process that much more smooth in January. But I appreciate that there's complexity in that third paragraph that warrants further exploration. So I am going to remove, thank you so much, Clerk. I'm going to withdraw this motion. And I'd like to replace it with the simpler motion that we strike from the definition of, or the description of the council priority setting process, the notion that priorities are limited, should be of no longer duration than 3 years, and that they are unusual items. And let me just see if there's another one.
Do you know where the specific paragraph and? Okay.
Yeah, well, it's the third bullet in the staff slide.
Yes,
Where you,
and in the handbook itself, it is section 7B. So
Yeah.
if you refer to that section broadly, we can
Yes.
find the language.
so within section 7B, remove the language limiting council priorities to 3 years. Also in section 7B, eliminate the language. It says priorities should be particular, unusual, and should get particular, unusual, and significant attention. Or the word,
So take away
take
the,
away the word unusual is my recommendation. So that's my motion. Remove unusual and remove 3 years.
I can support that. Second. Do you want to speak more?
Nope.
I don't have anything to say. Oh, Councilmember Tanaka.
Yeah, generally, I'm supportive of trying to clean this up, but I think my main issue with the priorities is just that there's no consequence, there's no measurement. So while it sounds something like, while the priorities sound like something like council priorities sound like something that should really be impactful to the city, it really isn't, unfortunately. So I don't know if we can solve it tonight, but I think you're kind of taking a step in the right direction, but, and I'll vote for it, but I just don't, unfortunately, I don't think this is going to have the impact that we're all hoping for. But hey, it's a step forward, which is good. But I don't know if you want to try to have something with a little bit more teeth that actually will, have a change. But I don't feel that strongly about it. But I mean, I think it would be nice to actually have something that is more meaningful and drives what happens in the city. But you could think about it.
I appreciate the critique and just want to offer, it's a night with 5 agenda items. There's a lot to go over. This process is almost upon us. I certainly regret that I didn't spot it when we were going through the enormous set of revisions carried over from 2022. So time is short. I want to respect that. We could spend a lot of time getting this to a place, 3 or 2 of us feel is right, without staff raising a lot of red flags. And I just don't think that's the right use of our time tonight.
Okay, do you have any other comments, staff? Ms. Alamos?
No, but we would probably want to go refer back to the recommendation slide if we want to add that to your motion.
Yes, please. On Councilor Tanaka's comment, I was wondering, would you like to add a E to B? Oh, now it's A. For council to explore or refer what you wanted to one of the standing committees or to a standing committee in the new year.
Refer what again?
Refer what you stated, to have performance measures
Oh, yeah.
for the objectives or the priorities, whatever it was that you wanted to see.
Yeah, I think the main thing is just a stronger connection so that because I think a lot of energy is spent on this, and it's so unfortunate it doesn't have a bigger impact.
I mean, the thing is, we're not going to be able to discuss it
Oh,
tonight. It's something that
yeah.
I think you can refer to council, request that council explore.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a good idea. So can the clerk
I
do
don't
that?
have the language for that because I don't know exactly.
Well, the main
all
idea is just so that it has a bigger impact on the city.
So under C, maybe add a E because we're recommending to council retreat to include the following elements.
Perhaps there's a discussion of performance measures associated with priorities.
But the thought is to refer it out, not to discuss at the retreat, right? And
Gotcha.
to come up with all of the
Refer it to
different.
PNS? That could be. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it
Back to
most
us.
likely come back to
Right, so to
PNS
toss it to council only to come back to us
for
feels like,
council referral.
but
Because
I
right
feel-
now we
you
don't have.
think it's within the scope of, we were tasked tonight with looking at the process, the priority setting process discussion. And there's a meatier topic that we can't get done for this year. But there's no reason why we should lose that thread and not have it in place if folks want it in place for next year.
This is just getting it on the agenda, but on next year's agenda for PNS.
Well, the most general version of that might be, again, this is that the retreat would include consideration of performance measures.
Mm.
So again, they can start the discussion. I quite frankly don't imagine you would be able to conclude it on that day. But it simply puts it on the agenda.
I was actually saying for council to do a referral.
Right.
Okay, so
So-
just to make sure that it's understood, that I'm not kind of,
Right.
council member Kanaka is not asking to have it discussed at the retreat, but to refer it out to a standing committee.
Okay, let's do this. This is my motion,
Mhm.
seconded
I
by
wanna
you.
ask you.
Yes, no worries. I just want us to not lose where we are. So Councilmember Tanaka, I don't think you were saying that you wanted this to be done at the retreat in January.
No, I mean, I don't have such big ambitions. I think just any step forward is a good step, right? So I think the thing on E is better than nothing, so why not? So it helps move us forward, so.
Except it's under item C, which says recommend the council retreat include the following elements. Wouldn't it be preferable for us to simply ensure that this issue that Councilmember Tanaka has raised is an agenda item for policy and services next year?
So with the original language of referral to the policy and services, is that the language that you would prefer?
Do we refer things to ourselves?
No, well, council has to approve the agenda item. So while we're referring it, they have to say, okay, well, we want you to put it on the agenda so that we can spend staff time and our time discussing that item.
I felt it was related enough to this agenda item and we're sort of kicking a piece of it over for later, but maybe that's not the case.
Yes, I do think it has gotten a little confusing. Um, Rather than have it be a standalone item, I'm wondering if perhaps it could be added to D, where it's resources needed to support, including consideration of performance measures, or something like that. Again, it doesn't presume that the council will get into a deep discussion so much as to include it as a consideration.
I actually preferred the original language that Madam Clerk put in there. It was clear, but maybe resources needed to support should be the very last item, because then resources to support would be needed for all of A, B, C, D, right?
Yep.
So I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, your original, well, I'm so sorry, but refer to Policy and Services Committee consideration of performance measures associated with priorities. Yes, but that would be a D, and then resources needed to support would be an E. And don't worry, I'll repeat myself.
So you're saying move the small
Lowercase.
d resources to support to become its own?
Yes.
No,
Nope.
no. So I'll say the big letter E, capital E, becomes D under C.
Lowercase.
Yes.
Lowercase d.
Yep, there you go, there you go. Just got it.
And then, yeah, this way. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
That's, yeah.
That the referral is coming under the council retreat item?
Right.
Okay. All right.
Does that,
Yes. that's
okay.
fine.
Chair, I'd also like to note that we added city to the standing committees, as we discussed earlier, to reflect that that the mayor would not be making appointments beyond the city standing committees. So that takes care of the regional committee concern you had earlier.
Well, an alternative would be, instead of, because again, the regional could be considered beyond the city standing committees, to replace that by mayor not make council member appointments to ad hoc committees prior to the retreat. That'd be more direct.
To city ad hoc committees. Thank you.
Yes.
I think this is much, yeah. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, if there's no more discussion, or edits? Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, we can take the vote, please.
Councilmember Ku,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott Haynes.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll move to item number two, action item number 2, which is a referral from council, discussion and recommendation to council regarding potential new procedure for council members to make referrals to staff.
Good evening. You get my fun voice this evening, whatever voice this is. Chantel Cotton Gaines, Deputy City Manager. The item that is in front of you this evening came up as a referral from the City Council for, I know, at least you can hear me, so we're gonna power through. For this committee to consider the idea of establishing a mechanism for council members to make simple referrals to staff in lieu of doing colleagues memos. We included the language in your procedures and protocols handbook around the colleagues memo process, as well as just a little bit of background that we had on this item. So this is an open discussion for this committee to consider if that is something that you want to recommend to the city council, and if so, what you would propose as a process for that type of protocol for the city council. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Cotton Gaines. Yes. We will go to public comments. Madam Clerk, if there's any.
There are no requests to speak.
Very good, thank you. We'll close public comments and bring it back to the committee. Any comments? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I find myself curious to know a little bit more than is in the staff report about what council said on May 20th. Is it possible for us to pull up the summary minutes from that meeting and see who said it and what the context was? I seem to be suffering from the same thing as you, Ms. Cotton Gaines.
That's a sympathy.
While the clerk is pulling that up, I have to admit that this was actually one of the ones that was a pretty short recommendation. So as you're talking about the idea of short recommendations coming to staff, this is one of the things that sometimes occurs is it is pretty brief. But we will pull up what's in the sense minutes so that you have the information you're requesting.
So the current procedure is to have at least 2 council members make a colleague's memo. Minimum, and it can, at that point, I guess, what is the timeline for staff to put it onto the agenda?
There's not a prescribed timeline. What we would typically do is we'll review it. Staff will do an initial read or evaluation of the resource impact. That's our role. And then have a meeting with the sponsors, the authors of the colleagues memo, just to make sure we're have the opportunity to fully understand as well as to share our preliminary review, and then we'll put it on the council agenda. That I would note, and I think this is referenced in the memo. So that's the formal colleagues memo process. There is the simplified version for allocation of certain funds that the council made more streamlined within the last year or two. And then there's also the very informal, it's not a colleagues memo, where there can be a discussion at the council meeting, and by acknowledgement, typically the city manager would say, yes, we'll get back to you on that. So I just note that those are the less formal versions.
Madam Clerk, thank you so much for pulling up the summary minutes. Councilmember Tanaka, do you have any comments or questions? Okay. The other thing, I was looking in the background on the staff report, it says refer to staff as simpler requests then. Did you get an idea what the simpler requests mean?
With, excuse me, with the summary minutes displayed on the screen, this came from Councilmember Burt referencing that he was looking for something simpler than the colleagues memo process. So that was the depth of the word simple shared.
I note that it says the city manager added staff would need to research options or mechanisms used by other agencies. I'm not sure there's been an opportunity to do that yet.
Sorry, there has not. We are really not aware of any other process used by other agencies.
How they have items that were not as part of their priorities and they can, that whether they can introduce mid-year or, and how they do it, right?
Or perhaps at any given meeting, or, you know, how a single council member, or again, whether if it were similar to ours, more than one council member might agendize an issue for a discussion.
You're saying you don't know?
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
okay.
I'm sure that the policies vary a lot, but we have not really looked into it for any specific agencies.
I feel like we're finding ourselves without sufficient background information, the three of us, on, none of the three of us is reflected in this conversation at council on May 20th. And here we are sort of tasked with trying to do something about it. So I would recommend that we table this item and at a minimum, seek more information from colleagues who thought it was a good idea so that we can take the referral and investigate it. But I don't feel we have the raw materials we need here right now.
Councilmember Tanaka?
Sure, yeah. So while I was in this discussion, I actually agree with it. I think it's actually spot on, and I'll tell you why. The agendas we get as council members, right? We're the elected people from people, the public. Yet the agenda really isn't set by any of us. It's largely set by staff, the city manager, unelected people, and when I first started on council, it wasn't that hard to get stuff on the agenda, but it's gotten increasingly very, very difficult. There's like all these hurdles you got to go through. You got to get 3 people, which is really hard because of the Brown Act. If one person says no, you're pretty much done, right? And I think that we should have a much lighter weight process because we are the elected officials. Yet, if we can't control the agenda, we can't steer the city because it's pretty much set by what staff sets out. So I don't necessarily know the answer to this, but I think I know the problem, which is that over the years, at least since I've been on council, it's crazy hard for anything, basically, even for the mayor to change agenda, I heard it's pretty hard. So, which is weird because, staff is supposed to work for us, but actually, no, it doesn't because they set the agenda and it's really hard for council members to actually change agenda or get something onto the agenda. So I think the idea here is actually correct. Now, how to do it, I don't know. Maybe we should just go back to where it was 8 years ago when I started. But it shouldn't be so hard as it is now. Because I think what it does, it means that pretty much we have unelected people running the city. And I don't think that's the point of our democracy. So I think the idea here is correct. And maybe it could be something as simple as, maybe one less person need for colleagues memo or forget the colleagues memo. Maybe just if the person plus the mayor agrees, great. Or if there's 2 people that agree, it's on the agenda, right? Something simple like that. But I think we need to, because we are entrusted by the people of the public and we're accountable to people of the public, because if they don't like what we're doing, they don't vote for us, right? We're out. So I think we should re-empower ourselves versus have it so tough for us to put something onto the agenda, which I think is in my mind increasingly crazy in terms of how hard it is. It shouldn't be like this.
So I'll say that, through the years on being on council, I've had a lot of colleagues' memos that I haven't submitted because workload, but then also writing it up, researching it, and getting buy-in from colleagues, right? To be honest, we only need two, the author and another person to support it to bring it onto council. So it's not really three. You can get a third one. It's if you want to, but that is quorum. I mean, that is Brown Act. So I appreciate this referral, but I see it turning into something unruly and overburdening, and potentially putting off something that was on the priority list, and have staff suddenly change everything that they're doing in order to address that one that was not even a priority. I mean, I've been frustrated with it too, because I haven't been able to introduce my memos. But at the same time, I do believe that we have to be cognizant about, especially because we're not behind the scenes looking at what staff is doing and how much they have to work on it, research it, make sense of it, the legalities behind it. Sometimes multiple departments are working on it. So I can appreciate some caution here and recognize that there might be unintended consequences that come from this. So I understand being in charge, but also we need to kind of understand where our staff is and our employee, what their situation is, and to make it not a overburdened work environment. So I would support Councilmember Lifcott-Hames' suggestion that perhaps more research needs to be done on this in order for better understanding about what other cities are doing, if they're doing anything at all. I know a number of cities have no way of putting anything on their agenda besides what has been determined at the very beginning. So I really don't think we have enough information to move forward tonight. So is this to be continued or tabling? I'm not sure.
Well, yes, it depends on the sense of the committee. If you would like us to do some initial review with other agencies, perhaps, well, the one that always comes up is Mountain View. So we could check with them to see what their process is, and perhaps one or two other cities, to give the next year's Policy and Services Committee an opportunity to consider what we find.
Right, I think that would be due diligent of us to do that, even though, as Councilmember Lithcott-Hames said, our names are not on this in any of the comments. But yeah, I think, it would be due diligent of us to kind of look into that before, well, for the new Policy and Services Committee to look at that before a response to council. Do you want to move it, Councilmember Lithcott-Hames?
So am I moving to continue to, how do I do that? To a date uncertain?
To continue to a date uncertain, and with staff to bring it back with some examples from other cities.
I think we can just pull that language from the summary minutes, clerk, where city manager referenced research that staff would do.
Now, I'm pulling a consent calendar item. That would be different. But that's a different topic, so.
Is it recommending that city council continue to a date uncertain, or the policy and services? Right.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay. If there's no other comments,
I think we need something, will the motion be under the agenda item so we know what we're talking about?
Mhm.
Okay.
he was very astute. Okay with you? Okay, we can take the vote.
Councilmember Ku,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott Haynes.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes item number 2. Moving to item number 3, action item number 3 is recommend City Council approve the various task orders with Baker Tilly for internal audit services to 1, execute fiscal year 2025 task 1, which is citywide risk assessment. Task number 2, preparation of annual audit plan. Task number 3, selection of external financial auditor and annual audit coordination. Also included in this is number 2, amend the fiscal year 2025 budget for task orders, and 3, amend the fiscal year 2024 budget for fiscal year 2024 task number 4, which is to execute the annual audit plan.
Good evening, committee members. Kate Murdoch, City Auditor. We are recommending City Council approval. Oh, do we have the presentation up? I didn't even check. Apologies. All right, we can go to the next slide. We're recommending City Council approval for 3 separate actions related to task orders, as Committee Member Ku mentioned. These actions will have no fiscal impact on the city auditor budget and or the Baker Tilly contract. First, we would like to execute task orders for the remaining fiscal year 2025 tasks. Task 1, which is the citywide risk assessment. This risk assessment will inform the FY26 annual audit plan. Task 2 is to prepare the FY26 annual audit plan, but the task itself occurs during fiscal year 2025, which is why it's titled as such. Task 3 is for the selection of the external financial auditor and annual audit coordination. So all of these tasks will be completed from January 2025 to June 2025. Second, we would like to realign the budgets for the 2 fiscal year 2025 tasks. We recommend reducing task 1, which is the citywide risk assessment, from $55,000 to $40,000. This is because there's not enough time for us to do a full risk assessment between now and April, when we will present the FY26 audit plan. In addition, since we just completed the FY24 risk assessment and the FY25 audit plan, which will be presented later this evening, it didn't seem to be a good use of city resources to go through a full risk assessment again in such a short amount of time. Instead, we will send out a brief survey to capture any changes in the risk landscape since our recent risk assessment work. We're also recommending increasing the FY25 task 5 from $60,000 to $100,000. This task covers preparation of quarterly reports, annual status reports, provision of the city's hotline, and other ongoing administrative activities, including travel. We've had to increase the budget for this task each year of the contract, as the contract amount has not been sufficient for all of these activities that are required by the audit office. Next slide, please. Finally, we recommend the City Council amend several task orders that fall under task 4 FY24, which is to execute the annual audit plan. And we would need to realign the authorized budget with a net zero impact. We had budget remaining after the completion of the ADA compliance audit. We would like to use those funds to cover shortfalls in the other audits listed here: recruitment and succession planning, emergency preparedness, utility billing, and the dispatch center assessment. So this concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know there were a lot of fiscal years, and it can get a little confusing since we got behind with some of the work last year.
Thank you, City Auditor Murdoch. I will go to public comments before we come back with questions and comments.
We have no request to speak.
Very good. That closes public comments. So first, I just want to say thank you so much for revisiting the scope and the amounts to the plan so that you can make it more efficient. So thank you for that. And if there's any questions from my colleagues or comments, please go ahead, or you can choose to move the motion. Councilmember Tanaka,
So,
he's still thinking.
Thank you, Ms. Murdoch, for your work and for this presentation. I am ready to move this, but just wanted to wait for my colleague if he had comments. In the interim, I will offer that on packet page 18, under number 2, amend FY 2025 task orders to realign the authorized budget with a net zero impact overall. I believe there's a typo at the end of paragraph 1. It refers to the FY 26 annual audit plan to begin on July 1, 2026. And I believe if it's for FY 26, you mean year 2025.
That is correct. Apologies.
No worries.
Good catch. Councilmember Tanaka.
yeah, thank you guys for putting this together. Quick question. So is there, in this plan, do you have something in here around, like a performance audit?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Are you doing, as part of your work here, a performance audit?
Of Are we talking?
So for instance, like how is our procurement versus other cities, right? Like how do we procure, or how well are we, like performing on certain tasks, like a performance audit?
So the last presentation of the evening will be our presentation of the FY 25 audit plan. That work will begin in January, and we do have 5 audits, as well as a follow-up audit activity that we will be proposing at that time. I do have a full presentation about that next audit plan.
Okay, so item 5 then. Okay, that's fine. I'll wait till item 5. Thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't quite sure which one we were talking about.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
So if we're ready, I will move the recommendation in the staff report. I move that we recommend to City Council that it approve items 1, 2, and 3 as articulated in the staff report.
Sure.
Do you want to speak to it? No. Okay, we can take the vote, Madam Clerk.
And I apologize, just for the record, did Councilmember Tanaka or Councilmember Ku second?
Councilmember Lifcott-Haynes moved it, and then Councilmember Tanaka seconded.
Thank you. So for the vote, Councilmember Lifcott-Haynes,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Ku.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. This concludes action item number 3. Moving to action item number 4. Office of the City Auditor, presentation of recruitment and succession planning audit report.
And we will have Mike Chimera will be presenting the audit results, so I will hand it over to him.
Thanks, Kate. Good evening, City Council. My name is Mike Chimera, manager at Baker Tilly, and I'm here to present the results of the recruitment and succession planning audit. Next slide, please. First, I'll go over the objectives of the audit. 1, determine the efficiency and effectiveness of the recruitment and hiring process. And then 2, determine whether a formal succession plan and related policies and procedures are in place. The first finding in the audit is monitoring and oversight of the recruitment strategic plan. So in August 2023, the city contracted Municipal Resource Group, or MRG, to conduct a comprehensive assessment of the city's recruitment process. Then in May 2024, MRG issued a recruitment strategic plan with 31 initiatives to make improvements. It has to be said that the city has made a lot of positive strides with recruiting and hiring metrics. Specific metrics such as vacancy rates have improved. In 2021, the city had a vacancy rate of almost 17%, which has decreased the last few years as it is 13% in 2024. Additionally, a time to hire metric has been trending positively as positions are filled around 60 days, much better than it was a year ago, which was around 80 to 100 days to hire. Lastly, the city's turnover rate has decreased slightly over the past year as well. Overall, the improvements made by HR contributing to fewer vacancies, shorter hiring times, and decreased turnover. However, at the time of the audit, it was unclear if management had decided which recommendations from the strategic plan to implement, the priority of these implementations, and then an appropriate timeline for doing so. As a result, there's not been a formal implementation approach to the strategic plan. With that said, we recommend implementing an approach that has clear steps, specific timelines for completion, resource allocation, who does what, find priorities, what comes first, and then system for regular monitoring and reporting, including key metrics tracking, such as quality of hire and candidate experience. Next slide, please. Second finding relates to recruitment and hiring policies and procedures. The city's recruitment and hiring policies and procedures are no longer current due to the changes coming from the strategic recruitment plan. The policies and procedures have not been revised or updated since 1999. On a positive note, the HR department intends to hire a new recruitment division manager this year to integrate information systems and enhance data metric communication processes. In terms of recommendations, best practices indicate that the city should develop comprehensive recruitment and hiring policies that include items such as job posting, candidate screening, interviewing, and selection. City should also regularly review and update the policies and procedures annually or as needed based on changes in laws and organizational needs. Maintaining a detailed revision history log would also be helpful for tracking changes over time. Next slide, please. All right, thanks. The third and final finding relates to formalizing a succession planning program with policies and procedures. So in January of 24, Cal ICMA issued a statewide template designed to really facilitate talent discussions among local government executive teams. So, and then as of May 31st, 2024, the city has leveraged this template and created a pilot program called Workforce Career Advancement and Continuity Planning. This pilot program has been a great start, and it incorporates a lot of succession planning best practices. However, the program is not formally centralized citywide as best practices suggest. Also, it was noted the city currently lacks formal succession policies and procedures, specifically facilitate knowledge transfer. With all that said, we recommend establishing formal succession planning policies and procedures, as well as structured knowledge transfer program to ensure critical information and expertise are retained at the city. The city should designate a responsible owner to lead the development of policies and procedures for knowledge transfer across departments. Per best practices, knowledge transfer is a critical component of succession management, and there should be written procedures in place to formalize that knowledge transfer. So that concludes the audit results. Open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chimera. Let's go to public comment first, and then we can come back to a committee for questions and comments.
We have no request to speak.
Thank you. That closes public comments. Back to committee. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chimera. I have to say, every time I heard you say it, it sounded like you were saying secession planning. And I just want to be clear that the city of Palo Alto is not planning to secede from anything anytime soon, although some of us may feel the need. That is not what we're discussing tonight. We are discussing succession planning. And that just may be your Midwest accent, by the way, sir. I'm stalling for time right now,
No,
actually.
that's fair. That's
Okay.
fair.
Okay, my question is, when you say that the city's P&P no longer reflect current recruitment and hiring practices, do you mean that our current P&P is out of date with current practices in the field? Or that our P&P just doesn't reflect our actual practices as a city? Are our practices not up to pace, up to par with what's the norm in the field right now? Or do our P&P not match what we, the city, are actually doing?
Good question. Essentially, it's what's maybe the city will be looking to do after the initiatives of the recruitment study plan that was completed, as well as what's currently being performed. It's not metriced across other best practices. If that answers the question.
I think it does. Thank you. And can you tell us a little bit more? Perhaps actually Ms. Bland can tell us this exciting new hire, the recruitment division manager. Where are we in that process? Tell us a little bit more about it, please.
Good evening, Chair Koo and council members. Thank you for that question. Yes, we're happy to report that we have concluded very recently, actually, the recruitment for the division manager position. And it was an internal promotion. We did have a very comprehensive recruitment. I believe we received about 87 applications, many from the private sector as well as public sector. And there was panel interviews along with an interview with myself and Assistant Director Raish and City Manager Shikata and Assistant City Manager Kylie Nozay.
Okay, and have we made an offer and the person is starting, or we're not yet there?
Yes, she has accepted the position and is, very much into working on the project and assessment report findings and recommendations.
So when you look at Baker Tilly's audit of this particular facet of your department, how significant is this hire? And if it's, partially significant toward addressing some of the concerns raised, what else are we doing besides making this important new hire?
The addition of this position to our team is very significant. To implement and have oversight of all of the vacancies, having improved reporting really requires oversight rather than being in the role of a recruiter. And so this position really gives the value of being able to supervise, to mentor, to train, to address questions, give recommendations. We haven't had that level of oversight in the past to really concentrate just on recruitment throughout the city. And excitingly, to bring the innovative solutions. I'm going to introduce Assistant Director Nick Raish and ask him to add to this.
Good evening, Council. It's always nice to be with you. Nick Raish, Assistant Director of Human Resources. I would just like to start by saying we really appreciated working with Auditor Murdoch, Chimera, and the rest of their team on all of this audit, the recruitment pieces and the succession planning pieces. As you can see from the answers where we either agree or partially agree, we found a lot of common ground on where we're going in the future. And so if I can step back to one of your questions before about policy, 2-10, which is our existing policy, is quite old. It hasn't been updated since 1999. However, it is very vague. And what that does is it allows a lot of flexibility and agility. So we have actually updated, altered, and implemented new practices underneath the restrictions that exist in that policy because they are so vague and ambiguous. So you had asked, does the policy need to catch up to best practices or to the city? And we would say that the policy does. We are already in many instances using best practices, or what we would even like to call next practices, that came out of the MRG report, whether that's our on-demand hiring system we launched, our HRL liaison program we launched to increase bandwidth, or many of the other things that came out of the recruitment strategic plan that we're already doing. So the policy hasn't hindered us, which is why we partially agree of, yes, the policy absolutely should be updated, but we should keep in its core some of that agility where we can move as things change in the future while updating it to be more consistent with terminology of today as opposed to 1999 when it was a very different recruiting atmosphere.
I appreciate that. That was really well put, well described. Thank you. You know, in a different committee, we compare ourselves to Burlingame. We're thinking about improving the downtown streetscape. When you think about recruitment and succession, who's better than us at it? Who's the gold standard in the municipal field, and what do we need to do to be that?
It's a weird thing to say, but to some extent that's us.
That's certainly what we want to hear.
Yeah, it's hard to say that and have the right level of humility, but you know, talking to our counterpart, the HR director in Mountain View the other day, who just got that job, is excellently qualified for it, is going to lead that team into the future. They're just getting NeoGov, which is the applicant tracking system that we utilize. And one of the first things that they ask is, can we come watch how you use it? We understand you use all of the different modules and you've had it for 10 years and you're ahead of everybody on how you utilize it. And so that to me is one of the greatest compliments that we can get, is when our colleagues want to come see how we're using a system. And all that being said, even though we've had that for 10 years and we use it quite well, this year we're doing an RFP to go back out and see, okay, we've been using this for 10 years. Is there a better system? Should we still be looking at other things in this market and other ways that we can bring new efficiencies to an existing process?
Great. Thank you so much. That's it for me.
Councilmember Tanaka.
Yeah, thank you for your report on this. I was just trying to follow the conversation earlier that my colleague asked. So who exactly was the new hire? Like, what was the title and who does it report to?
Thank you, Councilmember Tanaka, for that question. So the new recruitment division manager position reports to the HR director, with a dotted line also to me as the assistant director. After a process where we had 87 starting applicants and did 3 rounds of panel interviews, the final candidate through that process that was selected was an internal candidate. It was actually one of the people who helped build out the strategic plan that we have now and worked very closely with MRG on that assessment.
Is this an individual contributor role or is it more of a managerial role?
So their current role or the one they promoted into?
The one that you're creating.
So the new role is management, division management level. It has 2 supervisors that report to it. So the key distinction is, instead of day-to-day task oversight, big picture strategic oversight of tracking towards goals, data-driven analysis, and making sure that we're living up to everything that we articulated in our recruitment strategic plan is their primary oversight, along with, of course, the HR director and the assistant director's help.
Okay, but yeah, my only kind of feel about all this stuff is I think as a city, we could have probably more individual contributors versus managers. So whenever there's more manager positions being created versus individual contributors, I always have some concerns. So, but okay. Now, one thing that we've heard on council from staff many times, ever since I've been here, probably even before, is that it's difficult to hire, right? That we need higher salaries, that we're not competitive, all that kind of stuff. Do you guys still feel, I mean, and I don't know if Bigger Tilly has an opinion on this, but do you guys still feel that's the case, that it's like super hard to recruit and, you know, we are, you know, we need to get higher comp packages to get people in, quality people in?
I'll see if the city auditor wants to respond first. Otherwise, I'm happy to field that question.
Sure.
Mike, did you want to, I know that that is something that we looked at. We did note that the city did increase, or I don't want to misspeak here, but essentially has the ability to go up to higher ranges so that they can make competitive offers. That was one of the strategies that we noted has been seemingly successful. So I can hand it back over to management to discuss further.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Councilmember Tanaka, for that question. Competitive salaries are critical. That doesn't always mean higher. So as the council members here are aware, it's one of our philosophies and strategies to have a target market placement within the different industries that we compete. And so our goal is always to be within that target. And if we are there, we find that we can be successful in hiring. And so it's for certain positions, that does mean, yes, keeping up with the market if it's a fast moving market. In other positions, it doesn't. It means that we can hold where we are and rely on either cost of living only and things like that to maintain our competitive placement. There are certain areas that we do work that are unique to the city of Palo Alto, and that makes it its own specialty recruitment situation, whether it's our electric utility, moving into fiber and residential fiber, having our own junior museum and zoo, things like that are somewhat unique to Palo Alto, which means we're already fishing in smaller pools or ponds for candidates, and those continue to be areas where we see the greatest difficulty in recruiting.
Okay, it's interesting because recently I've been doing a lot of hiring myself, and you know I had one opening, right? And I'm at like a no-name startup, right? No one knows who we are, no brand. Not like Palo Alto actually has a brand. And do you have any idea of how many applicants I got for this one position? But why don't you take a guess?
Without knowing the title of the position or the type of
It was a
position?
software engineering role.
Oh, 200.
I got 5,000 applicants, right? And this is and we're not Google, we're like no-name startup, right? So, I mean, right now in the tech world, it is like a tech depression or something, like Great Depression or something like that. And there's so many people looking for work. And I have so many people ping me like, hey, can you be my reference? Can you do this and that? Like, do you know of any openings? And so, I guess I'm just, on one hand, I hear from staff a lot that, oh, wow, we need to have higher salaries, need to, give bigger raises, this and that. And the other hand, as someone that's hiring a lot of people, oh my God, it's just the opposite, right? It's probably never been easier to hire. There's so many people applying, like so many people who are incredibly qualified. And these were, I've always been hiring, but I contrast that to pre-COVID times, and it was a lot harder, right? Trying to get a software engineer is like crazy hard, right? And salaries go up like crazy and just really hard, but it's like a total reversal right now, right? It's way easier. And I guess I'm just kind of surprised that this doesn't come to the city level, or it seems like this like a tale of two worlds, right? Or two cities, right? Where on the city side, it's somehow still very relatively hard to hire people, but on the tech side, it is just so easy, right? And salaries have gone big time, right? I mean, what might have hired someone at one level or one salary level, I could hire them for a lot less now. And so I it's like we're all in the same area, right? A lot of tech is still here in Palo Alto, and so I'm just kind of, the contrast to me is really stark about how like, and it's not just me, but like it's everyone I know that's hiring, right? There's just a lot more people looking for jobs than there are jobs now. And yet, from the city government point of view, it's like it's still hard, right? And I just think that's bizarre. These are people who have like incredible credentials, people who worked at Google or came from Stanford University or like some very elite institution, and yet we hear continual trouble in hiring and recruiting people for our city, which actually has a brand, right? Like my company has no brand, so I just find that just really kind of stark, right, in terms of the contrast. So I'm hoping that the things that the auditor pointed out can be implemented to try to get things unstuck, because I think that in general there's actually a lot of people looking for work. I think a lot of people have been impacted and are looking for work. There's a lot of really high quality, motivated people that we could get here in our city and could do amazing work. So I hope I hope that can happen. And a lot of places, the revenue, right, is going up, so they're making a lot more money. Like, look at Google, Meta, any of these companies, the revenue is going up, but the number of people they have is staying the same, right? If not shrinking. Well, the most extreme example is Twitter, right, or X, right? It's 1/10 the number of people. And one of the things that like even for my company, like to do what we're doing, at one point I might have hired maybe 4 to 5 times more than the number of people that we have. And the reason why we don't have to is because we use AI, right? I mean, AI has just been, over the past few years, just revolutionary, right? It allows us to do way more with the same number of people at higher quality level. And so I think that's the other thing to think about is that leveraging tools, right? The tools that are available. I mean, we're Palo Alto, we're supposed to be a city of innovation. So I think we ourselves should also use these tools, right? I think AI is the future, not the past, not something that we should pretend it's not there, right? So I think, especially for the work that the city does, we do a lot of writing, a lot of digesting stuff, right? And so next time we're thinking about hiring a super expensive consultant, or having another head that it creates a big pension liability for us, maybe we should think about leveraging technology, right? Being the city of the future, right? Rather than the city of the past, and leveraging some of this technology, because in the private industry, that's one of the reasons I think there's a couple of reasons, right? One is, I think, because tech overhired. That's one reason why. But I think the other big reason is just AI has been the revolution, right? And you simply just don't need as many people, right? But I don't really see that here in our city. I don't see us embracing this technology, although I think we should, right? Because I think the places where AI hasn't really impacted is like feet on the ground, like crossing guards or people to trim trees and stuff like that, right? That's so I think we should see more budget in that area, and probably less budget in definitely on the managerial side, right? So like there used to be a time in tech where you want to have like maybe 8 people to 1 manager, and now it's I have way more direct reports than that because AI and the tools are way better. You can manage a lot more people with the same number of managers. But when I see the city and I look at the org chart, which is really hard to get, by the way, but when I do get the org chart, it's like we're really top heavy, especially the way the world is headed, right? Like I think the CEO of NVIDIA, right, which is one of the most valuable companies in the world. The CEO, he has something like 60 direct reports, right? And before that'd be kind of unheard of because you couldn't really keep everything straight. But now with the tools and the AI technology, you could do that, right? You could, one manager can manage a lot more people effectively. Or same thing with Elon Musk, right? You look how many direct reports he has. I think just at Tesla alone, he has like 30 something. So anyways, I just want to encourage us to, and I appreciate what the auditor did. I'm just hoping that you guys will kind of, look at what's happening in the private sector, right? And look at all the people looking for the jobs. I think the people, if you aren't advertising to people in the tech sector, you should, because there's some people looking for jobs, like so many hardworking high caliber people looking for jobs. So these people should be, and the benefits here and the pay here is actually quite good compared to the private sector now. And plus you get pensions. So I think a lot of people would be very attracted to the compensation packages being offered here. Plus, get every other Friday off, which is great. And that's lots of vacation. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that make the perks here quite nice. So I'm hoping that, kind of the work from this audit can help usher in a new age of recruiting and efficiency and trying to tap some of the talent that's living here in our city, right? Versus maybe there's more of an emphasis of like internal or only from other cities or something like that. But I think you'll find that people that went to Stanford, went to Google, can actually serve the city quite well, right? They don't have to come from Mountain View or from some other place.
Can I just reiterate what Auditor Chimera's mentioned, was that the vacancy rate has reduced down to 10%. And so we are able now to attract excellent candidates for our positions. Also, our largest department is utilities, and the majority of those employees are not managers. Those who are, you see, out on the streets making repairs and responding to emergencies, in addition, of course, to our public safety groups. So it's not the managerial positions.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and just in general, when I looked at city manager office, I think, wow, that's quite large compared to, like, if I look at San Francisco or San Jose, I think, wow, that's quite large. And so, yeah, I just don't think we need more managers, and especially this day and age when, so much of the technology is so good, people can manage a lot more people you don't need to have the same kind of ratios that we had in the past, like we had in the 90s. I think going forward, organizations are going to be a lot more flat. We're going to see a lot more individual contributors, a lot less people who only manage people.
I would be remiss if I didn't say to anyone watching who is looking for a job, if they want an amazing, exciting, engaging career in government, cityofpaloalto.org/careers has all of our active jobs right now. At any given moment, we're looking for up to 30 at one time, and those are across the gambit of everything we do, from libraries to community services to the zoo, the airport, our utilities. So we do engage in advertising across all of the usual job boards where job seekers are, but if they want to come direct to us, we'd love to engage with them and talk about how their skill set might fit with something that they don't even know we do. So those are always conversations we're open to having. Thank you so much.
And also, just for the record, just wanted to clarify that the comment about Fridays, our employees are working their 80 hours or more every 2 weeks. So just wanted to clarify that shouldn't be interpreted as people working less than the standard amount of hours expected.
Well, I guess I was just referring to that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you guys get every other Friday off, correct?
I'll look to HR to talk about many of our work schedules, just because I sound so horrible.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Tanaka. There are 3 approved types of schedules that exist in the city for hourly employees. Exempt employees, like all of us who sit up here, we work the hours that we need to work, whether that's 5 a.m. in the morning, 8 or 9 o'clock at night at a council meeting, whatever it might be. For our hourly employees, the 3 different types of schedules they can work are known as 5/8, which is kind of your typical 9 to 5 that people are used to, a 9/80, which is you work 9 days, and every one of those days, except for one, is a 9-hour day. So you work longer than 8 hours in the day. And then you have one day that is your normal day off. That could be a Friday. It's different days in different departments in the city based on coverage so that we can provide the service we need. And then we also utilize what's called 410s. And that's where people, mostly in our municipal services center, this is our streets crews and our utilities crews, work 10-hour days so that they can start earlier or work at off hours when they can work on the roads in a safer manner.
Also, for those that are listening, I don't want people to be scared. When he says 80 hours, it's not 80 hours a week, it's 80 hours every 2 weeks, yeah. Right? Because in the private sector, like, especially at my start, people do work 60, 80 hours a week, but that's not what's going on in the city. So anyone that might be listening, don't be worried that you're working 80 hours a week. You're working maybe 40 at best. And so, although in the private sector, you do typically work 60 hours a week or more. So it's especially for tech companies.
And let's not forget that our treatment plant operators work a 12-hour shift. Our dispatchers work a 12-hour shift. Fire, of course, 24-hour shifts. So it's more than just the 3. We have a variety of shifts that, our employees work every day. And so that makes us, also unique for that reason.
Well, and that goes to show that, this is city operations, right? It's very varied and there are different needs. So sometimes when we look at things, one size fits all doesn't really work. So on the other hand, I do want to thank the city the city auditor for this report. It's, it does offer a light to what goes behind the scene and what can be recommended. I appreciated that HR staff gave a response with regard to finding number two's partially agree. I wanted to find out what is behind the partially agree for. Actually, never mind. I think I just spoke to that, right? One size fits all might not help with succession, especially with the different departments, right? Now, on the centralized information system, is this something that is going to be implemented? Has it been introduced? Is a budget provided for this? Or is this not something that is being considered for the near future in order to help with efficiency and
The information system referenced is not new. I think it's been in place about 20 years, actually. I think the innovation that we would like to work on is integrating our information system with NeoGov, which is our applicant tracking system. At this time, the two systems are not integrated. And so that is a project that we would like to work on.
that'd be great, because I see that right now you're forced to manually generate data metric reports, right? And obviously that takes time, people doing it versus doing other things. So, so when are you going to bring it for? I mean, so you're working towards putting an item on council budget?
Potentially, we currently have NeoGov as our applicant tracking system. Nick mentioned that we will be issuing an RFP. And so once we issue the RFP and seek council approval for a new contract, we would come to council to seek approval of a new contract for that type of system or extend it with NeoGov.
Very good. I mean, I think the main thing was to make sure that this is going to happen just so that there is less work with doing it manually.
That is our goal.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, this might be out of not this here, but since AI was brought up, does City of Palo Alto have an AI use policy?
Thank you, Chair Koo, for that question. We currently do not have an officially adopted AI policy. We're currently vetting and reviewing other cities and counties that have, the most recent being Santa Cruz, who adopted an AI policy that generally promotes the use of it within clearly delineated boundaries of not replacing judgment as one of the key areas of distinction. So helping with summarizing reports, it could even draft and rewrite something you've already written, but the initial creation needs to be generated by a member of their staff and a member of their team. Yeah, and so IT is taking the point on that particular project. That doesn't dissuade staff now from being able to use within certain parameters AI to assist with writing and other tasks, as long as it doesn't supplant judgment.
Thank you. I do think, you know, in the long run, the new council should be reviewing AI use policy just to have something in place and to place boundaries so that it doesn't take over judgment, like you said. But otherwise, I mean, thank you very much for the report to the city auditors and for you being here to answer questions. And so I think I don't see any lights. I don't see any looks at me, so we can move for a motion. And anybody want to make one?
I will. I move that we approve the results of the recruitment and succession planning audit report.
To City Council.
It didn't say that in the recommendation, which is why I didn't say it.
Okay.
Am I supposed to like refer to council? You know, it's only been 2 years. These folks have so many years on me.
And we'll work on making sure the titles say that will be a recommendation for the city council to approve it.
Thank you. I move that the Policy and Services Committee recommend that the city council approve the results of the recruitment and succession planning audit report from Baker Tilly.
I'll second it.
Any comments? Speak to the motion? No? Very good. Madam Clerk, will you please take the votes?
Councilmember Ku,
Yes.
Councilmember Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott Hames.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. We conclude item 4 close, and we move to item number 5, approval of Office of the City Auditor Annual Risk Assessment and Fiscal Year 2025 Audit Plan. Madam Auditor?
Thank you for the opportunity to present the results of the Audit Office's citywide risk assessment and resulting audit plan for fiscal year 2025. I want to thank and acknowledge City Council and Executive Leadership Team for all of their time and assistance in meeting with us and providing information and feedback. Next slide, please. I'll give a brief overview of the assessment process this year. The risk assessment and development of the annual audit plan are the first 2 tasks included in the city's contract with Baker Tilly for audit services. The risk assessment typically takes place in the fall and winter, with an annual audit plan being presented and approved in the spring in preparation for the work to begin in the upcoming fiscal year. Due to changes in audit leadership, these processes got behind a bit this year, and the risk assessment was conducted from June to October of 2024. The resulting fiscal year 2025 audit plan work will be performed from January 2025 through June of 2025, which will then put us back on track to align next year's fiscal year 26 audit plan with the budget. Next slide, please. We consider 3 key areas when conducting the risk assessment. First, we gather information such as assessing budget documents, council priorities, prior audits, and also conducting interviews with key individuals. We then assess this information and the possible risks that have emerged based on 8 risk categories listed here in the middle column. For example, is the risk primarily operational or financial in nature? Once we compile this list of risks, we rate them by likelihood. How likely is it that the risk might occur? And impact. How big of an impact would the risk have on the organization if it occurred? Next slide, please. This year, in addition to analyzing key city documents, the Audit Office interviewed nearly all members of City Council and Executive Leadership Team using a basic SWOT analysis. We asked individuals to consider city strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in relation to the risk categories you see there. Next slide, please. In terms of assessing impact and likelihood, we use the criteria listed here. I wasn't going to go into it in a lot of detail. It's also included in the report, but an example would be looking at the budget of a program area we've identified as having potential risk. The greater the budget, the larger the potential risk to the city, and the higher the assigned impact score. Next slide, please. As part of the risk assessment and developing the audit and annual audit plan, we also look at the city's entire audit universe, and we define this as all of the city's departments and the different functional areas within each department. So here's kind of an example of what that looks like. Again, you can find a complete listing in the report of all departments and functional areas that we looked at. Next slide, please. In our assessment, we identified a total of 28 high-risk areas. We've conducted audits in several of these areas over the past couple of years, and you will see some of those audit topics listed here. For example, you will see ADA compliance listed. We presented the results of the ADA compliance audit in October of this year. We also looked at wastewater treatment in 2023, for example. 4 of the 5 proposed audits for this fiscal year 25 audit plan are listed here, including building permit and inspection fees, junior museum and zoo operation, equipment and materials inventory management, and purchasing card program. As you may remember, the purchasing card program was on last year's audit plan, but was deferred by City Council so we could conduct an assessment of the city's dispatch center operations, which is currently underway. Next slide, please. The final audit we're proposing for the FY25 plan is public safety staffing and overtime, which you can see in the middle of the page here. Next slide, please. As you can see at the top of this last page, the succession planning, recruitment, and retention audit were part of the FY24 audit plan, and investment management was part of the 23 audit plan. And then our next slide should be, yes, here's the list of proposed audits in its entirety. In addition to the 5 audits, we'll be conducting a follow-up on prior audit recommendations and providing a status update at the end of the fiscal year. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. We'll go to public comments.
We have no request to speak.
Very good, thank you. We'll close public comments and come back to council. Committee. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Murdoch. Would you mind, Madam Clerk, pulling the slides back up? The first slide that showed, I guess, the most risky situations. Yes, great. Okay, so Ms. Murdoch, you alluded to the fact that of the 6, I believe it is, items proposed for audit, not including the TBD ad hoc requests, but the other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that most of them were drawn from this top area. Is that right?
Correct.
I couldn't find, let's see, I guess fire and police.
That one's on the next page.
Okay. So I don't presume to be an auditor to understand how this works. There's a lot of stuff here. Top 28 risk areas, and we're gonna audit 6. Time is limited, money is limited. I appreciate that. My question is, how did you pick these 6? Because they didn't just get sliced off the top. They aren't the 6 most risky when it comes to total risk score.
Sure. So part of the audit process is also kind of looking at what other projects are going on. We also try and balance things like if we've worked a lot in a department. So for example, cybersecurity was talked about by numerous people who we worked with, but we have done quite a bit of work in the IT department, especially in regards to cybersecurity over the past 2-3 years. So that's one that we didn't feel we needed to touch this year. Thought we'd kind of give IT a break from having the audit office in there. Another audit topic that came up a number of times was the procurement process. Since we just completed a procurement audit, as well as I know with the new CFO, she is working on changing processes. So we typically don't want to audit something that is actively in a state of change, because it's kind of a pointless exercise for us. It's much better if we come in after the changes have been made and say, okay, are the changes working? Are they effective? So there is a little bit of that. We did present this proposed plan, and the initial plan we presented to the executive leadership team had a couple special projects which had been talked about in our interviews, and then we ended up finding out that both of those projects had already taken off. They'd already been assigned and work was underway. So again, it was not, those were 2 areas where, it didn't make sense for us to look at them again or at this time. One of those was records retention management, and the other was a fiber optics project for the utility. So it is kind of a balancing act of looking at all these different factors of, what studies are going on, what changes are happening. If you look at this first page, that first item, the wastewater treatment, that we did touch that in FY 2023. the building permit and inspection process. We will be touching that as part of the building permit and inspection fees. And that was something that we spoke directly with the planning department about, and that was a suggestion on their part that we look at the permit and inspection fee process. The ADA compliance on the third list, we just did that one. So we did try, and we are trying to hit most of the top risks that emerged up here. But this is a proposal, so we're open to suggestion.
So thank you for that. I would like to drill more into what you just said about planning. Because, second highest risk here is the building permit and inspection process. Didn't make the cut for the proposed audit plan. And a conversation you had with planning led to your deciding that the higher priority was building permit and inspection fees based on the recommendation of city staff. Help me understand, if there's a problem in building permit and inspection, it seems to me that the perspective of a third party, such as yourself as our auditor, that this is a second highest risk of all the risks the city faces, might supersede whatever perspective that staff may have in this regard when comparing the two potential audits that could come to planning and development services. They suggest you go with fees, but your own data shows the building permit and inspection process is the more paramount concern.
So I guess a couple of things I'd like to point out. One, this list is inherent risks. And so part of what is feeding into this is budget. Part of it, there are a lot of different factors that go into that score. It is a somewhat subjective process. So I wouldn't look at this and say, oh, this is, a hard and fast. I mean, we do the best that we can to add quantitative measures to very qualitative at times areas. So, and I apologize if I gave the impression that staff had kind of chosen the list here. That is not the case at all. I think what we heard in our interviews with people was that there were concerns around building inspection fees and taxes and permit fees. So that emerged for us as an area to look at. I would say in terms of the building and inspection process itself, I think one of the things that we had heard was that had recently undergone quite a bit of change and maybe is still in flux. So again, I, kind of leaned away from looking at that piece of it. And since we'd heard concern about, or potential concern about inspection fees, that we would look there as part, as the main focus.
I will say that I think that is the right reason not to go with building permit and inspection processes, which is that a whole lot of stuff is kind of happening that may, we hope, lead to greater efficiency, greater customer satisfaction, a reduction in this sort of perception that Palo Alto's processes are inhibiting building things. That said, I know this was a concern I raised when I was interviewed, and I'm sure I wasn't the only council member to raise it, because this is a perennial concern we hear from constituents, whether private homeowners, developers, commercial people. And so my hope is that this will, that if a series of improvements are underway, that you as our auditor will tuck that in the back of your mind and say, you know what, I need to be sure I'm circling back around to this at the appropriate time. What is the appropriate sort of span of time after which you would want to kind of check in and say, this is something that is reputationally problematic. This is something that is problematic for other reasons. I want to be sure this doesn't somehow fall off the radar.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Councilmember Tanaka.
Yeah, I have to agree with what my colleague said about planning and development services. I have a lot of office hours and yeah, a lot of people are not happy with the customer service. So I think we need to do something and improve it. We made the first step is actually to measure it and make sure that that we understand the problem. It's kind of like I think Alcoholics Anonymous is like the first step of the path to sobriety is admitting you're an alcoholic. Right? So I think we need to take the first step here. Okay. Anyways, I think my colleague said enough on that. But I saw that I guess your one of the things on the list here is purchasing, and I actually I'm not so worried about Palo Alto falling into the ocean or wildfire or some some other maybe kind of risk like that, physical risk. But I think where we probably have the biggest risk actually is just efficiency. I mean, if you just look at how much we spend, 1.3 billion, look at the number of people we have, 1,200 people, you look at the city size, there's no city that comes like us, that's like us, right? That spends as much and has many people as us. And so, and also in terms of the procurement, I think there's a lot to be done there. So can the auditor talk a little bit about what your plan is there and how we're going to get our hands around all this?
In terms of the procurement process?
Yeah, and efficiency, because I think that's the key thing, right? I think, I don't think in general, I mean, aside from what my colleague said about development center, I think, it's not like we have super high crime rate or that, there's a, big disaster like over our heads. I think it's just that, we're in a relatively wealthy community. Whenever we need more money, we just check up the utility rates. So we're not, we don't have like dire fiscal constraints like some other cities, right? And so as a result, I think, our procurement, our spending, our efficiency is not quite there. And procurement in general is something that's been bugging me forever, right? So I was wondering, are you able to talk about what your plans are there and how we might be able to address it?
Sure. So again, our primary reason for not including the procurement process is there has been management change very recently. And our understanding is that they are making changes and updating processes and looking for those efficiencies that you're talking about. So at this stage, it didn't seem to make sense for us to touch that again, especially with the procurement process audit that just came out. I know that was more of a compliance related audit and looked at the internal controls, and that was how that was scoped. And I think those were important things for us to look at. So I think that there certainly is room, moving forward in the next year or 2 years to look at the procurement process and the changes that have been made over this past year and, over the course of FY25 to see, what the impact has been.
Well, I guess the thing I'm pushing for, and I kind of jumped the gun earlier, was around performance, right? I think more performance type of audits. Because I don't necessarily think people are stealing money from the city, right? I don't think we have that necessarily. That's a big risk. But I do think that efficiency is, right? And, like benchmark ourselves against other cities and, seeing how we're doing. I think that's the bigger risk in my mind. So I don't know whether we can try to get some audits in that area so that we could see where we stand. Maybe I'm all my fears are just misplaced. Maybe we're just top notch in every area. I just didn't know that, right? And so maybe your audits would show that, right? That would be great. So do you think this is something that we could do? Get some more performance audits going?
Yeah, is there a particular topic that you were
like procurement, or maybe we could benchmark our customer service, or maybe we can benchmark how clean our streets are. I mean, there's a lot of performance areas that we could talk about, right? I mean, I've got complaints from merchants about like, hey, University Avenue is really dirty and this and that, and so maybe we could compare our city against Menlo Park's downtown, or Los Altos downtown, or Mountain View downtown, right? Or back to what my colleague was saying about development center, right? That development center is notorious, right? Notorious, right? Of all the other development centers in the area. I mean, because I have contractors talk to me sometimes. They say, "Oh yeah, Palo Alto is the, and you get the Palo Alto rate whenever you do business in Palo Alto, right? Whenever you get contract because of how difficult it is with our development center, and so yeah, so like stuff like that, like so benchmarking that. I just think there's so much opportunity to actually benchmark ourselves, because I think a lot of so far the audits I've seen are more for the maybe more traditional city, but I think our city is kind of an elite city in that, we don't have as many fiscal issues just because we have wealthy community and we can just, like I said, jack up the utility rates all the time. But I just think that means there's room for opportunity in terms of performance audits, right? And just trying to tune up performance.
So I do think that, we, through the course of this process, we do seek feedback from, as I said, in this case, we talked to nearly all council members in the executive leadership team. And these were the themes that emerged, I think, and I am new to this process. I'm new to the city. So I think if council wants to make a suggestion about, what's the word I'm looking for, to substitute one of these projects for another project. I'm not sure what that process looks like. I don't know if that needs to go through the larger city council. For example, the purchasing card program audit that was on the last audit plan, and that was approved by city council. We said that we would do that in the next, when it was deferred, we said that would be coming back now. So that was one that was put on the plan because it had already been approved by city council as something that people wanted us to look at.
Kate, this is Kylie Nozay, Assistant City Manager. If I can just try and help a little bit from a process standpoint. Ultimately, the council does review and approve an annual work plan, and that's part of the role and the expectations of the city auditor. And so that process is to move through this committee first with the committee's recommendation to the full council. So the city auditor has put this work plan together for your consideration this evening. Ultimately, if the committee wished to change this, there's a few paths forward, but ultimately you would do that through your action tonight with a motion in terms of a change to the council or that you're recommending to the council or asking for further work from the city auditor.
Question. So whether it's a unanimous or other vote, this plan will be an action item on the council's agenda, or is it going to be a consent item?
Sure. Ultimately, it's the committee's discretion. Obviously, as you all know, your policies and procedures note if it is unanimous, it would go on consent. However, I have seen committees at other times recommend an alternative approach, but staff's default will be to follow the council and committee's policies and procedures.
Thank you.
Yeah. So on slide 10, follow up on corrective actions. What exactly is that audit?
So we essentially look at all previous audits and report on the status of recommendations and if they've been implemented, if they're in progress, or if they have not been started, essentially.
Okay. Yeah, if I were to look at this, I guess in terms of junior museum and zoo operations, is that what was the thing that triggered that?
My understanding with that is it is, I think the program had gone through some changes and just it's working with the public. It's working with children. There are just a lot of different moving parts. So again, not only did we do interviews, but some of this also came from the survey data that came in the prior year. We the way that the contract was set up was that every other year we would do a deeper dive, doing a more comprehensive survey. So that was one of the items that emerged from the 2023 survey. So we kind of blended the data from that survey as well as the interviews that we conducted this year.
And the purchasing card program, what percentage, or maybe staff knows, what percentage of our spending is through the purchasing card, roughly?
Apologies, Councilmember, I don't have that at the tip of my fingers. I'd have to go research that.
Okay, I have a feeling it's relatively small, but I could be wrong. I think the majority of our spending is actually through our consent calendar, actually. Because those tend to be in the millions, right? And this one, I can't imagine being that high. So if there's one, if we were to swap out, maybe that's when we swap out for some sort of procurement performance. So that's something I would have in mind. And in terms of the junior museum and zoo, I mean, my perception, it seems to be okay, at least I don't get a lot of complaints from people about it. So if we were to maybe swap out just customer service, like if I benchmark customer service for the city, that might be a more useful audit. So those would be my two suggestions and maybe possible swaps in terms of trying to keep the workload reasonable, but maybe capture some of the things that are perhaps bigger concerns.
Councilmember Tanaka, can you, which one are you trying to swap out? Potentially, which ones?
Oh yeah, potentially the first one, purchasing card program. And the reason is because I don't think too much spending happens on purchasing card. And also I think we've done a purchasing card audit. At least I remember one. I don't remember the exact time we did, but I know we've done it before. So I think we're probably okay on that. But we haven't really done a benchmark, a performance audit on our procurement. And that's something that I've never seen it ever since I've been here on council. So not in 8 years has it ever happened. And then the junior museum and zoo, you know, I am the council rep to it. And, you know, I really haven't gotten that many complaints about the junior museum. So I don't know how much issues there are with that, but I do get a lot of issues about customer service complaints. You know, how people feel like they're not, yeah, the customer service is not the greatest. So
Customer service, where? Which
or
department?
largely on the development center, but I've got it from utilities, I got it from the police department. And so, you know, I think benchmarking that might be a good thing. And because maybe our customer service is top notch and people just have an axe to grind. I don't really know, but I mean, you guys could go to my YouTube channel, my Facebook channel, and you guys could listen to all of them. And there's a bunch of them on there where people complaining about this kind of stuff. So maybe those two might be sort of like a procurement performance audit instead of purchasing, and a customer service satisfaction versus instead of the junior museum. Those are the two that I could think of that might be more impactful for the city.
I guess I would say, I just want to reiterate my concerns about doing a procurement process audit at this time, given the change in management and the changes that have been communicated that are underway. So it is hard to audit a changing process, right? Because anything that we try and pin down, it's like, well, that's in flux, that's changing. So, you know, my concern there would just be that we could end up spinning our wheels a little bit and not being able to produce much meaningful information.
Yeah, I understand that. And I guess my only point is I just never seen it done ever, like in my 8 years. And maybe, you know, it was done and I was just not there at that time, but maybe it was before my time. I don't know. But I have seen a purchasing card program audit several times, and those have been total, like, nothing meaningful has ever come out of that audit, at least when I've seen it. And I've seen it several times. And I understand why we do it, right? Because we're worried that maybe people are misspending the city's money, but this is a relatively small amount of money versus the procurement, which is, you know, probably 100x the purchasing card program. And so we just, you know, given your office has limited amount of bandwidth, to me, it makes sense that we focus on the big things, not the small things.
So just a little bit of history for folks. Purchasing card audit, we have done one, to Councilmember Tanaka's point, in the past. I don't believe we've done one since I've been here. So that's at least 9 years that we've done one, like we haven't done one. That doesn't mean we have to do one, but just for context for folks.
But I've only been here 8 years. I've seen it on council. So
We've provided updates. So we, whenever audit recommendations are outstanding, like Kate just identified, or sorry, Auditor Murdoch just identified, staff used to kind of periodically bring forward either policy changes or updates on where recommendations are at. So I'm not surprised, perhaps in some of probably maybe the earlier years during council while we were not under the current Baker Tilly contract, that you saw updates perhaps on past audit recommendations and implementation of either corrective actions or adjustments to processes. So fair that you've seen it. The audit process itself hasn't happened for a minute. In terms of what Auditor Murdoch identified, ultimately it is a council's discretion on if there's a desire to do a procurement audit or a customer service audit. I will just reiterate one of the things that she noted, what some of the changes that we are making in purchasing. I know staff were timing that in accordance with the completion of the last audit that just completed in, I think, August or September of 2024 of the purchasing process. And so to do another one, understanding where Councilmember Tahanka is coming from, that's some of the feedback and planning in a timing perspective that I believe Auditor Murdoch is trying to articulate.
Yeah, I guess I'm not saying there's never been a procurement on. I guess I'm more talking about procurement performance, right? I think the procurement they're trying to do is like, is there fraud? Is there's people paying them? I mean, so to be honest, I think the staff here is honest. So I don't think there's that kind of stuff going on, right? That's why I'm not worried about the purchasing card. I don't think that's the issue, right? I think the issue is just like we get one bid like a large percentage of the time, and we, I don't know if we get nothing in the value for the money. So I think a procurement performance audit would be quite useful because I've never seen it done. But yes, I've seen like, is there fraud going on? I don't think there's fraud, and so I don't, so I'm not as worried about that, but it's really more about spending our money well, which I've never seen done ever.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Lithcott-Haynes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To follow up on Councilmember Tanaka's notion of a customer service performance audit, I was kind of intrigued by his implication that looking at public works and the planning department and the front desk and the main lobby and all the various places, and 311 perhaps, all the places where we purport to be kind of responsive to a human who comes forward, that might be fascinating. Getting to our reputation as, a city that says no, it might be wonderful to see, well, how true is that? Is that perception aligned with reality? Are some departments really swift and great at getting back to folks and others less so? So I would be interested, Ms. Murdoch, in knowing, an audit of that set of things was not contemplated. Is that inherently 5 audits if it's 5 departments' customer service efforts? Or is there a way to scope it so that it is swappable for something that's on your list that we may feel is of a lower priority?
That's a great question. I think to some extent it would be, how many departments would we be touching and how would those departments get selected? I certainly don't think that we could touch all of them, given the budget constraints. And then I think it would be really looking at the systems that are in place to respond to customers. We've did a little bit of that work in looking at the grievance process, and with ADA, we are looking at the dispatch center right now, and customer service is a piece of looking at that. So I'd need to give this further thought on how exactly we would approach that. I think that would be a unique audit, not one that I have done before. I've done similar things, but typically just in relation to a single department. And typically one that has a very public facing, role such as development services. So,
Well, I appreciate you giving it thought. On our retail community committee recently, we were talking about the sort of perception versus reality and how to really shift the perception out there about our responsiveness, about our interest in saying yes rather than having a default of saying no and so on. So I'm excited about that idea, and that's why I wanted to just carry that thread forward a little bit. My other question is on the Junior Museum and Zoo. It strikes me that there could be two concerns that put it on the list. One is it's not making money. What do we do? Can we do this? Is it being run in an efficient manner? The other is it freaking inequitable that we're charging $14 for 2-year-olds? That's a different concern, equity versus operational efficiency. And I don't know which one put it on the list. I think both of those concerns may be valid. Do you have any idea what's beneath this sort of one-liner that we're getting in terms of the description of what would in fact be audited?
So my understanding was that it was more from an operational perspective and ensuring everything from, you do have small children coming in there. So what are your safety protocols? How are your staff vetted? I mean, all of the things that would go into running a program like that is so interactive with the public. It represents quite a bit of risk, when you think about it from that perspective. So.
Okay, thank you.
I think just to add to the Junior Museum and Zoo operation, we do have animals in there, and should any harm come to them, that's a reputational thing that the city will be responsible for and looked upon. But like Madam Auditor said, there's also children, but I would imagine, more for transparency and accountability to the people here in Palo Alto is to understand, where are all the places that need to be reviewed and recommendations made. So I appreciate it. I would actually like to move and recommend to City Council to approve the Office of the City Auditor's Risk Assessment and Fiscal Year 2025 Audit Plan and corresponding task orders with Council's consideration for what Councilmember Tanaka said for visiting the FY25 proposed audits, if they want to swap out any of the proposed audits for procurement performance and customer service satisfaction in the different departments. And did you have something? I agree with that. Okay. And then also to provide the summary minutes in the staff report to council so that they have an idea what and where policy and services is coming from with this recommendation. Does that work? Or is it confusing? Or maybe I need to get a second. Okay.
Or, and Kate, sorry, Auditor Murdoch, please feel free to help chime in here a little bit. Couple points, I think, for the committee's perspective. Just acknowledging the time where Baker Tilly is at in terms of work being done, as well as the council's calendar. The motion that was just described would effectively kind of only allow Baker Tilly, to finish existing task orders until that council discussion and finalization of the audit plan occurred, which essentially kind of puts future or new work by Baker Tilly on hold until that conversation. which I don't think is the intention of the committee, but just want to gut check that. Because what you just discussed is an action item with the full council to have that dialogue of, do we want to swap things out? And what could the scope of, say, a customer service audit look like? And so you would obviously need Auditor Murdoch and her team to come forward with that for that dialogue at the council level. An alternative path could be to recommend approval of a portion of the audit plan and execution of tasks with Auditor Murdoch to return to the Policy and Services Committee to review swapping out 2 task orders that are not moved forward with potentially, new fleshed out. And the reason I make the suggestion of splitting it and perhaps coming back to PNS is it sounds like there may be some dialogue that needs to happen in terms of scoping, say, a customer service audit. As we talk about departments, how that would work. And sounds like Auditor Murdoch might need a little time and ultimately feedback on that. So one consideration could be, if the two I'm kind of hearing the committee talk about are the purchasing card program and the JMZ operations audits, what the committee could potentially do is recommend the full council approve the risk plan, task orders, and audit plan excluding JMZ purchasing card program, and a referral to return to PNS to discuss swapping out those 2 items for these 2 alternatives. This would allow Baker Tilly to progress on these items that seem to be in alignment with what the committee's looking for between, say, December, January, February, while still working towards what I believe the committee is looking for in terms of a different totality of audits. Kate, did I get that roughly right?
Yeah, and I think I had not, I appreciate the comments. I don't think that I had put together that this would delay the audit plan so significantly. I do have significant concerns about that, just in terms of keeping our staff engaged with work. So I think if there's, and again, I'm a little bit new to this process, so I don't know if there's a way to settle on alternative audits in this meeting, or would it need to go to the full council?
Actually, I would really like to see an audit. Not that I'm going to be there, but I will be reading the reports. I'd like to see an audit on the junior museum and zoo operation, which is why I kind of phrased it the way I phrased it, to leave it for city council to decide. But I also hear, based on the auditor's comments, is that it appears that there might have been preparation in some of the interviews with staff and everybody else on how to move forward on that. Going with assistant city manager's suggestion, perhaps the only one to see if it's possible for a swap is the administrative services purchasing card program, and the rest to be approved. That's my amendment to my motion, but Councilmember Tanaka.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I'm not gonna be here either, so I'll leave it to the future council to figure it out. But I'm comfortable with that.
And with the audits for procurement performance and customer service satisfaction, whichever one it is to replace the purchasing card program. But I would ask to go ahead and approve the remainder 5. Is that, Madam Clerk, thank you for keeping up with all of this discussion and getting it on the board.
Could I, well,
Yes,
and you can tell
please.
me if I'm speaking out of turn.
No,
Just in terms of trying to get this contract back where, get us back on track. I'm wondering if we could say, because we will be bringing the FY26 audit plan in April. So if we put the procurement process audit on the FY26 audit plan, and then we could do the customer service audit and put that on the plan, I don't know how is that possible to do that? Assistant City Manager.
Sure. Auditor Murdoch, when would you want to put the customer service audit on? What plan? This 25 or 2026?
We could put it on this 2025.
I
So-
thought you were just saying, put it on 2026, which comes before this committee in April of 2025.
I was suggesting that for the procurement performance audit, that be on the FY26.
So what I'm hearing Auditor Murdoch say for the committee's consideration, two options. You could move forward as we've described here. You could also approve the work plan for FY 2025 as proposed with a referral that the 2026 work plan include these two additional audits for procurement performance audit as well as customer service audit for PNS in April of 2025. The third option is to split those two and do a hybrid and do 1 and 1. Basically swap out one in 25's work plan and refer one to the 26 work plan. Sufficiently confusing? I'm sorry, you guys. Ultimately, these are your work plan and options.
let's do what Madam Auditor has suggested. So we will approve fiscal year 2024 risk assessment report and recommend approval of the fiscal year 2025 audit plan as is.
Okay.
Then 3. Madam
Is-
Auditor, can you help with this?
So item 3 would be, at least let me start with the intro and then Auditor Murdoch, I'll need your help on the details. Item 3 would be, I think it would be refer the city auditor or refer to the city auditor. Consideration of a procurement performance audit and customer service audit as part of the 2026 work plan to be reviewed by policy and services. You guys can wordsmith from there.
Before we vote, I would just like to acknowledge this is our last meeting as this committee, and my 2 colleagues are rolling off after distinguished service. Who knows who's going to be on this committee in January? Could be me, could not. If it isn't, there will be no through line on this. All the more reason to be sure, I'm looking to Ms. Cotton Gaines here, that assuming this passes, this does happen, that when this comes forward, this referral, a new committee might find it strange, you may not know. The staff report giving a robust recitation of how we got here, maybe even attaching the summary minutes would be really useful, I think.
Absolutely.
So Councilmember Tanaka?
Yeah, so I guess I heard the auditor say several different things, and I guess why not just do the customer service audit now and drop the card program? I guess, and then do because I think this is what you suggested at first, and then do the performance audit, the procurement performance audit in 26 instead. So why not do it that way versus do both of these in 26? Because I do think that the customer service thing is an issue, right? I mean, I guess I would just try to understand why would we want to push that out? And I don't think that, staff is running around charging, trips to Tahiti on the purchasing card.
So I'm open to making that change if that's possible to do that in this meeting. My only concern was we're already on a tight timeline to get the FY25 audit plan complete. We've kind of been in this situation of doing 2 audit plans in the course of 1 year. And so delaying the start of any of these audits, that's what I'm trying to avoid. So if that's possible to switch that in the course of business today, I'm amenable to that. I think we'll do, as a part of all performance audits, we do, kind of a mini risk assessment at the beginning, and we'll, look for some guidance at that time to determine, which departments we'll be, looking at with the customer service. That was my only thought about delaying it to FY26, would be to have more time to get an understanding of what council is interested in us looking at.
Yeah, I mean, to make it more clear, while I hear a lot of complaints from a lot of different departments, the ones I get the most is development center. So, maybe that's the one we start with, and maybe you structure it so that it's done at the end towards the end of the year versus immediately, so you have time to work on it. Yeah. So I mean, like one department I could say that I get no complaints on is like the art center, right? I don't get even though they have lots of classes, and they have lots of customer interaction. I never hear complaints about that, but I hear complaints about utilities, I hear complaints about development center, police, right? So I think those are probably you kind of probably know this already, or you could just look at the survey that we did yesterday. But the ones that are scoring high, you probably don't have to worry about. The ones scoring low is probably the ones you have to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
So Councilmember Tanaka, can we still move ahead and you support this, or?
Well, I guess I wanted to ask you, so I was just thinking that maybe, because I do think there's a customer service issue. So I just wanted to ask you, you're the maker of the motion, whether you would be open to that, or whether you really want to roll with this one.
Actually, I would really like to roll with this one simply because I do hear the concern, and I think,
I'll defer to you. I mean, and I'm also not going to be here, so.
Yeah, I'm not
So-
either, so
Yeah.
I really want to make sure that these audits do happen. But for my comments, I just want to let Madam Auditor know that I really like this report. I think that you gave a lot of information in your overview and the process considerations, but it's really interesting to see your risk assessment, department description and key risk areas, how you put each of the department and what the areas are. And I just thought that was really great. Thank you. And then, of course, there's the scoring distribution, but then also what you have in your list of some of the high risk areas, the functions, and so it was a really good list to see from. And so I just want to say thank you for your recommendation. For me, emergency preparedness is actually a really big part, especially with the Foothills Fire Plan, mitigation fire plan, simply because, we do have wildland areas within the city of Palo Alto. And I don't want to see any loss for our residents. So having that plan is also, emergency preparedness is something that is very big on my list of things. So with that, if there's no other comments from staff, Madam Auditor or Council.
I would just say that the emergency preparedness wildfire audit will be coming in February. So
Awesome.
we're almost done with that work. So
very good. Thank you so much. If there's no other comments, then Madam Clerk, will you please take the vote, and thank you again.
Councilmember Tanaka,
Yes.
Councilmember Lithcott Haynes,
Yes.
Councilmember Ku,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you so much. Concludes item 5 and future meetings. I don't know if you want to do it with a new team or.
I will take a moment. Oh my gosh. I just want to thank you for your service this year as chair. Thank you also to Councilmember Tanaka, who's also served as chair of this committee over your years of service. We will not have a meeting in January. We will find out the composition of our committee. Our first meeting will be in February. As Auditor Murdoch stated, we have 2 audits as of this moment that are coming, the wildfire audit as well as hopefully the dispatch assessment audit. And then our race and equity quarterly update will be coming to the committee. We will let you know, or the new chairperson know, any other items as they come up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure serving. Thank you. Okay, and with that, we're
evolved over the years, and like I say, you've kind of mastered it now. So awesome job, awesome job.
And I want to take the opportunity to thank these colleagues for their service to the city, to numerous committees in numerous ways. You've really been a role model for me as I was starting out. I mean it. You don't need to smirk. I actually mean it. I'm grateful and we'll miss you. Thank you so much.
I'll miss all of you. Thank you.